Hello, everyone.
Hi everyone.
Welcome to the third episode of the Mood Booster podcast.
Welcome back.
We're
Welcome back.
back, baby.
We're so back.
We're so back.
God, I need to lower the pitch of my voice every beginning of these episodes. I'm just like
Someone's at home just listening, their eardrums blow out.
every time. Sorry.
Welcome.
Yeah.
So the third
I
episode.
know, it's glorious to be here.
Beautiful, isn't it?
Yeah.
I thought I'd say I was speaking to my old housemate when just before we had launched about the podcast, about what we're doing. And he looked up a stat online, and it said I think around 75% of people who start a podcast give up by episode 3.
No. Well, that's the news for you guys.
We're giving up, guys. We've hit episode 3. We've hit the mark. So it was lovely knowing you guys.
It was really lovely. I know we got to know each other last week, but no more. Sorry
we're
about
going to
it.
bow into our...
Yep.
I don't even know what I was going to go with that. We're going to bow.
Whatever into, not this. Bye.
See you guys.
No, of
Psych.
course, psych.
Psych.
April Fool's was yesterday. We're just carrying on.
Second April. Yeah.
Well, respectfully flip that because we're going to be here for infinity. So
Of course, you guys are stuck with us.
You're stuck with us.
I don't like saying that. You guys, you're stuck with me. It's the old classic.
The old classic.
Lucky you guys to be here.
You're
How lucky
blessed.
are you?
You're so blessed.
Start paying us for this content.
Follow our Patreon.
Follow us on Patreon, guys. We have no content out there. Let's start putting some feet pics up on Patreon.
It was funny. Sorry, we will get into the topic very quickly. But at Run Club earlier or last week, some of our friends were like, "Oh, can you do this? Can you do this?" I was like, "Yeah, we'll crowdfund it. Do you want to pay us?"
Wait, what was that about?
Like they were like, "Oh, can you put videos on Spotify and all these things?"
Oh,
and
my
of
word.
course, we intend to. And watch us on YouTube if you want to see us.
Yeah. If you're on Spotify, migrate over to YouTube.
There's a lot of investment going on here,
Yeah.
and we've got to take
Cash
it
poor is a term to use, maybe.
one step at a time. Hey?
One step at a time. But you can listen to us.
Yeah, we love it.
Look at
Anyway,
us.
Charlie, tell us, what are we talking about today?
So this episode is on transitions. It's quite a relevant episode, I think, for both of us because we've been going through a lot of transition recently and still are.
Yeah,
We're
about to go
just
through
for one. Yeah, we are both moving into a new house, or I've moved, over sides of London recently, so that's been a transition for me. This whole podcast has been a massive transition in our lives so far.
Yep.
So it's a little bit about how we're navigating transitions, but a bit before that is on the theory of transitions. So trying to contextualize it, whether some transitions are voluntary or involuntary.
and then what that means for someone, right?
Yeah.
And from a psychological perspective, or just from our own perspective of what we see transitions to be, how we experience those, and what our brains might be doing in those situations, and based on whether it's voluntary or not, or whatever, the sort of feelings of control or lack thereof, and all those sorts of things. But then importantly, based on our experiences and what we're going through, how we may work through those, experience those. It's important to say we both agree that obviously transitions aren't always a negative thing, and then it's good to also find the joy in that, because that's what we're here to do.
Exactly that. There's a lot of joy in transition.
Yeah.
I know our thoughts on, change in general, whilst this episode isn't on change, I think differ quite a lot as well. So it's basically talking a bit about the good, the bad, the ugly in transitions.
Everything in between.
And everything in
As
between.
always.
God, that was good.
God, we know what we're doing.
Gosh, we go.
God, we're so
This is
clever.
unreal.
I know, we should start a podcast.
Yo, bro, I have an idea. Let's start a podcast. What's your favourite pizza topping?
This is like completely putting us down, and I shouldn't really say this, but I just on the top wanted to. I was watching, of course, this TikTok the other day, and I sent it to you, but just showing with the listeners. It was like there was a stand-up thing where all of these comedians come in,
word, this is
and they
hilarious.
anyway, and it was like, name one thing that two guys running a podcast never say, and this girl immediately comes on. It's like, no, I'll wait. You go now. I don't know if I explained that very well, but it's just really funny.
Basically saying that we love just to chat, really.
To chat and never let someone else
No
speak.
way you.
Sorry, it was
That
really
video
funny.
was hilarious.
I know it was. Anyway,
Clip it here.
Charlie, how was your week?
My week. How's my week been? My week. It has been, if you're asking, a little bit flat, actually. I think, with everything that's been going on recently, the highs with everything, just coming down from Rome, the launch of the podcast as well. These things in these past few weeks. I was in Dublin over the weekend with Felix, which was a major highlight for me. That was a brilliant weekend. But I think just
Your brother, right?
my brother, sorry, yes, Felix, my younger brother. We went to Dublin, which was a fantastic little weekend away. And that was great. But I think mixing with the tiredness, slight hangover, and just the overall effect of, coming to more normalcy. I know it's, not normal typically in what we're doing here, but
Yeah.
I think just that sort of ride has led me to feel a little bit, I don't know, a little bit just more flat in, during the week. But it hasn't stopped me from doing the things I like. It's been sunny out, so I've been sat out enjoying that. Still found good routine from working out during the week as well. So I think those little things have brought me a lot more happiness than the bigger things as of recently have, if that makes sense.
For sure. How do you feel about the flatness? Is that something that's unnerving, or are you kind of just okay
No,
with feeling
I'd
like
say I'm very okay with it being there
that?
because I know, this too shall pass. I know that it'll become less flat, but also there are those highs to look forward to as well.
Yeah.
But realistically, for me, it is those small wins. It's those small moments where I'm listening to a good song in the sun. That's a nice moment which brings me a lot of joy, and it's that moment there which is the thing which actually keeps me happy or makes me happy. So although it feels like it's flat, and when you're in these flat moments, they feel like they'll last forever. For me, I know they don't, and just being patient with myself in that moment helps quite a lot, I think. So I think I'm able to sit with that a little bit.
I guess I asked because, like, for me, if I were, and I know myself, if I were to be in Dublin or whatever, or on a holiday and were feeling that way, I would then sort of not catastrophize, but I'd ruminate on that and be like, why am I not able to just be happy that I'm on a holiday with my brother and feel good about that? But yet I'm here feeling a bit flat, a bit mellow, whatever it is, and it would make me feel like, I guess, not spiral, but I guess spiral in that moment.
Completely.
So yeah, I was just wondering how that sort of being in like a place like Dublin, which you'd been looking forward to for ages,
Completely, yeah.
with your sibling who you'd been looking forward to spending time with for ages.
I think on the weekend, mainly itself, I was feeling pretty good.
Nice.
It was just like around the weekend. Obviously been going on all these trips recently.
Yeah.
It's, when you don't have one for a little bit of time, which I know is unbelievably privileged thing to say, when I don't have a holiday for a month or so, is ridiculous.
What?
Oh God, I'm not going away for a month.
How can I do this?
How can I live? My ancestors like
trenches.
eating bread with no shoes, just rolling in their graves.
Yep, those Surreyan ancestors.
Roman ancestors, please.
Okay.
So yeah, I think for me it was just realizing that feeling would be fleeting, and not to try and push it down or judge myself for feeling that sort of flatness.
Okay.
Just allow it to pass.
Nice.
And that was my week overall.
Okay.
But overall, still with that feeling there, a pretty good week.
Nice.
Surrounded with little, bursts of happiness. How about you? How's your week?
Well, before I go on to me putting you on the spot, Peak and Pit of Rome?
Rome?
Dublin?
Well, if you're saying Rome, I can say it was Dublin.
No, we've talked about Rome enough.
Ooh.
Just for anyone that doesn't know, Peak and Pit is basically, or Rose and Thorn, as our American friends might know it as, is where
Why would you Rose and Thorn?
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know
Guys,
what accent that
I neglected to mention last week, but I did Camp America in my gap year.
There you go.
I went to America. I get grief from my friends being like, I
went to
I literally
America.
can't remember that. Did you even know I went to Camp America?
Whoa, we what? Huh?
Did you know I went to Camp? I did Camp
Yes,
America.
yeah.
Did you actually?
You told me like 4 times.
For God's sake, why is this happening to
What are you
me?
trying to say, man?
Sorry, other religions are available.
For God's sake.
I did Camp America anyway.
Yeah.
That's tangent. Rose and Thorn. Getting back to
I
Peak
forgot
and
what
Pit.
you asked at this point.
Basically, Peak and Pit is where you find you say one of your highlights or your main highlight from whatever you're talking about, and then also the lowest part. So yeah, please tell me your Peak and Pit from Dublin.
My peak would have been... there are a lot of peaks in Dublin. What was it? My peak was probably... We went to this nice pub called the Cobblestone. Very... I think it was traditional, but all the locals probably thought, it's bloody touristy. Really, really nice pub. This Irish band was playing just in the corner. Felix and I were there. We were about... How many pints were we deep? About 10 pints of Guinness deep at this point.
10 pints?
Well, we had this thing. So we went to
believe that whatsoever.
Genuinely, we went to the Guinness factory tour at about 2:30 p.m.
Yeah.
We had 2 on the way there. And our main goal, we said, as we were walking back from the Guinness factory when we had another 2, was... All right, we have to see how many Guinness signs we can see on the side of the roads, hanging outside pubs or on like a wall. And the amount of signs that we saw, that had to be the amount of pints that we drank for that day. That was the goal for us. And we had 4 at this point already, and we ended up counting 10 on the way back. Okay. And we were like, right, that's another 6 down. By the time it was 4:30, by the time we got back. So,
to be fair, I did see your text messages. They were I couldn't really read them. So
Yeah, no, it was loads of fun. So we were in this Irish pub, absolutely steaming, and we were just filming these band and doing these weird videos of ourselves. We had bought these Irish farmer caps as well in Temple Bar, the most touristy thing that we could have possibly done. We were absolutely scammed. It was €60 for two of those hats.
Yeah,
I've got a bit of a trait that when I go out or whatever, I just buy hats for regardless.
you've been mugged
We
off
were
there.
wearing these Irish hats, 10 pints deep, having an absolute time in this Irish pub, basically singing, like,
What you like?
no, I'm done. I'm not going to do that again.
So that was
That was
your
the
peak.
peak. That was the
Okay,
peak. That was a
nice.
funny
That sounds
moment.
sublime.
Yeah, that was fantastic. And then the pit, the next morning.
The 10-person hostel, or
No, oh god, we were staying in a 10-person hostel. That was rough. I think I was saying to you when we got back at night, either side of Felix in either of the bunks, basically both of them were snoring. When one snored, the other was breathing out. So basically there was one continuous snore because they were, as one was snoring, the other one was preparing to snore and vice versa. So you just had this low snore for about 8 hours of the whole night, and it just...
yeah. And I
Couldn't
guess
sleep
continuing
and
the
that.
introductions on from Charlie, he's a massive sleep princess.
Yeah, I'm not a princess.
And
I'm
you,
absolutely not. I just like a good
Nothing wrong
sleep.
with that.
No,
That's
okay.
okay.
No, I
Delicate
like a good
flower.
sleep.
Yeah.
Delicate flower.
Delicate flower when it comes to sleep.
I'm not a delicate flower. I just like a good sleep. You can't blame me for that.
Yeah, not
So that was
mate.
the pit, I'd
no
say.
blame
was
whatsoever.
That snoring mixed with the feeling slightly rough the next morning.
Yeah, that's completely valid. Sounds like a lovely holiday.
It was a great
and
holiday.
Wholesome time spent with Felix.
It was indeed.
Nice.
Felix, if you're watching this, let's go.
He will be. Hi, Felix.
Hi, Felix.
Hi, Felix.
Shout out. How was your week, Marcus?
My week. So let's start with the weekend.
Okay.
It was Saturday. I'm not someone that can sit and do nothing. I really struggle with that, which is something I probably should unpack at a later date in a different episode. But on Saturday,
You're not patient? What?
what me? Impatient?
You're
Never,
impatient.
never.
Wow.
Basically on Saturday, did park run. I do park run when I'm free every weekend. I love a good park run. Came home, the sun was out, glorious, and just sat in the sun for a few hours. Had breakfast in the sun, just sat in the sun. Went into town because needed to do something in town with the housemates. So went into town. Came back, sat in the other garden with sun. Continued until the sun left. Just literally sat there the whole time. Came in, had a nap. Crazy. Was like, this is sublime. Watched Last One Laughing, which is absolutely hilarious. If anyone is looking for something to watch, especially in the UK, it's very UK sort of humour. It's just sublime. They do it across the world. There's a UK version. It's on Amazon Prime. Other streaming services are available. So watched that, was crying with laughter, went to bed, and was just like, I can't remember the last time I've just done sweet FA.
It's nice.
And yeah, I would say I couldn't do that for another day, for sure. I was already feeling like, oh, I could be doing something here, or like I want to be doing something. But at the same time, I was like laying there like, I could be reading a book right now, but I'm also just enjoying doing absolutely nothing. So that was Saturday, and it was nice to do nothing because, as you know, for like months we've just been on the go, crazy,
Workhorses,
busy,
yeah.
which is, again, we always say wouldn't change it for the world. Sunday, time of recording, it was Mother's Day, the Sunday just gone, so I was at home with my family and the pets, which was nice. Wholesome day, again in the sun, just chilling in the sun. Was nice to catch up with my family. Haven't seen one of my brothers, George, for a minute, and Yvonne, his wife. And then Charles, my other brother, and Mum were there as well, who I'd seen more recently, but still, it's just nice to be with all of them. And then, yeah, this week has been a bit flat as well, to be honest. Had a cry yesterday, which was, it felt good actually. But yeah, just, I don't know, I think, like you say, just pendulum of emotion. It was so high this way the week prior. This week it's got to come back. Whether that's a chemical thing or whatever, let's not get into. But just was really flat, and beyond flat, I would say just actually low yesterday.
Okay.
Just feeling crap about myself, everything, and that sort of way that you get in your mind when things that are normal stresses or things that you experience, and whatever it is, your living situation, your relationships, your family, all of these things, they're just normal things, day-to-day life. When I'm in this way, they all just seem way too overwhelming and too much, and like all sad, and like nothing is like exciting or happy, and it's just you can get in your own head about it, but I know it's fleeting and they come and go.
Yeah.
It's just different waves of emotions. So I was kind of sitting with that yesterday. We had a long chat yesterday about it. Spoke to my other housemates about it as well. But yeah, I don't know if you mind me sharing about your call from your dad.
Please go ahead. Yeah.
But you said your dad called you, and you text me. We have been very much just immediately texting each other any feedback we're getting, because obviously we're just reveling in it and sharing it with each other. And your dad had called you saying how he was proud, and you sent that as a message. And my immediate, in all honesty, like hand on heart, my immediate thought was, "That's amazing. I'm so happy," and just like, I guess, all the happiness for you. My second thought was, gee golly, I'll never get that text message. Because if you listened last week, obviously my dad has passed away. And I haven't felt that sense of longing, or I guess deeper grief, for a while. So I think in a way it was, even though it was sad and I was crying in that moment, it was nice to feel like that in a way. Because what is it? Grief and sadness and grief is just unspent love for that person, which I do believe. So to be able to feel that is kind of me showing that and feeling that love that's just unspent, and I can't show that or feel that with that person that's not here. So yeah, it was a whole roller coaster of things yesterday. But we're here today, and as always, spoke through it last night, woke up today feeling far better.
Good.
And of course we're here now, which makes me feel even better. So
How much do you think having that chat yesterday helped you? This isn't like something for me. I'm like, tell me how good it was. I'm just wanting to speak about it. Yeah. How much do you think having that, working through it?
Yeah, it did. Like I say, and we mentioned in a previous episode 1, I believe, speaking things out. You're putting those puzzle pieces together, and then just putting language to what you're feeling and what's going on in your brain. Your brain's actively working through a process. You're
taking
to,
the power
to give
away,
meaning to it.
Yeah.
And yeah, in some way taking power away from it, because it's not something I'm holding on to or sort of allowing to control me, because I'm just speaking to it, and therefore, even though it's not something I can magic away by speaking about it, there is sort of that therapeutic element to it. So yeah, no, I think it was very powerful speaking about it, but it is difficult too, and I don't always like doing that, and sometimes it's just easier to go for a walk and just still feel crap. But I once again see through reinforcement yesterday, speaking about it does work, and for me anyway, and I know not everyone's in that place, but I felt so much better after.
I do think it's fine if you don't want to speak about it in the then and now, or even if it's like hours after you're still feeling that. I think it's fine to take yourself for a walk or take yourself out and be like, I'm just not ready to speak about it.
Yeah. But I know myself.
There's a line. If you know yourself, you need to. Sometimes it's uncomfortable to broach it. Be like, I need to speak about it, compared to I don't want to.
Yeah.
I think you can almost run away with that thing of like, I'm not ready to yet, and that could be years. So it's good that you did.
Typically, I'm such like a usually sort of an open person that says and thinks things out loud. Yeah. Obviously, I say things out loud, but when I'm thinking out loud, so I know for myself, even though other people might not necessarily get so much benefit from speaking immediately. I don't want to in that moment, but I know when I speak about it, I'll feel better just speaking. So there's sort of that immediate resistance of, no, it's fine, or like, nah, I'm good, cool, let's just go to bed and hopefully I'll feel better. But actually, no, sit with talking about it for myself, because it did feel better, and I know it does every time, and there's the reinforcement there. So yeah, woken up feeling much better today, very happy to be here. Good. Sun is out, with my pal doing what we love doing, and
heck yeah, let's go.
Frick yeah.
Flip yeah, this is brilliant.
Yeah. So anyway, should we transition on to the next segue?
I was about to say, how would you transition from that?
You're the segue king.
That was poor from me.
That was so bad from me as well. Let's transition on to the next segue.
Those transitions.
I was thinking segue and said segue.
We could do an episode on segues. Break it down.
Yeah, well, we've got stories about segues.
We do. Do you remember the YouTube guy who just cuts everything in half? Like an electric toothbrush, he'll cut a water bottle in half and just show you what's inside. It could be absolutely nothing.
Oh, okay. That does ring a bell, actually.
Yeah, we could do that with Segway.
Yeah, we could do.
Or not.
Well, we'll see.
It's not really our viable
let us know
brand.
If that's interesting for you.
If you guys want to see the inside of a Segway, let us know.
Yeah, let us know. Charlie.
Yes.
Transitions. Where should we start?
Oof, that's a question.
Control?
I think we should start with the idea of control and expectations of what one has, or at least with what I have, over a transition coming, trying to grasp onto what I think I can control with transitions.
Would you think it would be helpful in doing that to first outline some of the places where we're coming from right now in this moment in our current transitions
I think so.
context?
I think so.
I'll let you lead the way.
A big transition for me recently has been the house move and the move from London. So if you guys would know, if you guys have known, I've been in London for now about a year and a half, been over East London for all of that time. Moved over West about a week ago. Was it a week ago? About a week ago.
About a week ago.
And my work's over East. A lot of friends I have are over East as well. And yeah, I've made the move over West, and that's been a bit of a transition in itself, actually.
100%.
My commute... Was that?
Not a bit.
No, it's been a massive one. My commute to work before I moved over East was about an hour and a half each way. It then became a 10-minute cycle when I was living in East, which I absolutely loved. It made me have this freedom to go wherever, whenever. Now I'm back over West, that commute's back in. And so even that in itself is something to handle as well. And I think for me, if I'm really speaking on a little bit on control, something that maybe this is skipping way ahead of where we need to be, but for myself with trying to handle or deal with this transition, I found it difficult in trying to grasp onto things that I feel like I can control, because often with such a big move, even in itself, it's very easy for me to not spiral, but be like, oh, this is like, how long is this for? Is this forever? These are things I don't like, trying to ruminate on everything which, I don't like or I can't control, as compared to the flip side of, well, what's good about it? It's more residential, it's quieter, it's more peaceful. I get to spend more time with my friends, like all this sort of stuff, things I can control or things that I like instead. It's a bit of a flip side to the recent transition for myself, if that answers your question.
Yeah, definitely. The main thing, I think, for both of us, and obviously we'll go on to the controlling things, is the transition of is the move. So again, further context, yours has already happened, but all of us here, where we live now, were served a no-fault eviction notice. The landlords are selling the house, so off you go. And I guess what adds to that is we've lived here, and it's been a staple, whatever,
6 years,
for 7 years, well, nearly since 2018. So whatever that is, nearly 7 years. So that in itself is kind of like a constant that has been in all of our lives in this house. So knowing that was coming, and then having to put all of the work in to work through that transition, and the next move is coming up imminently. That is something that I'm going through as well, and sharing that. So there's different areas for you and I in terms of some of the different sorts of nuances around it. For you, it's like moving in terms of location and everything around that, and your commute and what that means in terms of freedom or whatever, and how much to the extent to which that you have control over that. But I think for me as well, a move is a big transition. And moving house when you've been somewhere for so long is also something that's like, there's that lack of stability or change in stability, or what we know. So I think they're two similar
but different transitions that we're both going through, which we can pull on right now. There are a lot of other ones with
podcasts,
this
right?
podcast, for instance, or
which I think
anything.
It's good for us to talk to the podcast as well, because today we want to talk about, firstly, like you already mentioned, involuntary versus voluntary transitions and things that we're choosing versus not choosing, but also not just focusing on the adverse side of transitions and seeing the beauty and the joy in them, because this transition of us sort of going from doing nothing to do creatively and not producing anything, to in a quick succession of like 2-3 months absolutely going to the other extreme. That's a huge transition in itself, but very joyful, and has made us, well, speaking for myself, the happiest arguably I've ever been. So it's important to, I think, that we've got a lot of context here that we might pull upon,
I think so.
and we will pull upon.
Do you want to start with talking a little bit about as well what's good and bad in a transition as well? I think it's good to probably differentiate how it can be a good thing and a bad thing. I think there are lots of things there, and perspective pulls onto a lot of how you see a transition.
For me, I think
so. For this house move, let's use that for you,
please.
For this transition that's happening, you've had this staple location for so long. How do you go about for yourself seeing this as a good thing as compared to, I have to move? Maybe not go into how, but what do you think is the difference between seeing a transition as a good thing versus a bad thing, if this even could be a bad thing?
I think it's important to first understand, like, the different mechanisms that might be at play in the perception there.
Yeah.
And then how they might impact how we perceive it, if that makes sense.
It does, yeah.
So things like we mentioned, control versus lack of control, or, the things like, which I guess we'll unpack, but things like cognitive load and making adjustments and sort of reconfiguration to change, or the endowment effect, or those sorts of things. I think it's helpful to understand those, which then allows you in like the later stages or later steps to then allow yourself to find it joyful, or to find the positives in it, even if it's something that would immediately seem adversarial, for example, or like a bad thing. So I guess for me, the first thing is like, is it a voluntary transition, or is it something that I've chosen myself? We've got two examples here. We've got been served an eviction notice, very much involuntary. I've not chosen that, right? And you, the same. And one of the reasons you've moved here is because you had to leave where you were living before, right? So for both of us, that's an involuntary transition.
It is, but also my choice to go over west was much more voluntary as well.
But let's just start from the beginning, right? On the surface, it seems involuntary, right? And that's something that's been put upon you as a decision that you then have to take control of. Yes, you will take control of it, but to start with, that's something that
something
you
that's
might,
happened.
is an external thing, versus us choosing to put all of our energy as another form of transition. We're volunteering and we're choosing and having control over most steps of the transition of leading into this podcast and going into this podcast, right? So we've got two different versions here. Immediately answering your question, one versus the other makes us, or leads us potentially into seeing one to be adversarial and one to be amazing. And I don't really need to explain which is which, but to make it clear and obvious, when you don't have control over it, or it's an involuntary transition, it feels more negative. It feels like
why
naturally,
it's happening to me.
Yeah, I don't want this. I didn't choose this. Whereas when you've obviously, there's something you're going into, don't get me wrong, any transition comes with its stresses and all of those things, its challenges. But when you've chosen it, that's the first thing, right? Because for me, I guess spelling it out and breaking it down, and I know you agree, one of the major reasons transitions can be stressful, can come with like anguish or confusion or sadness, all of these things, is because as human beings, we seek, and as from an evolutionary perspective, we want control over our lives. We want consistency, we want predictability, and our brains are wired to seek those things. Even if you're thinking from an environment of evolutionary adaptation, which is from an evolutionary perspective where we developed and our mechanisms and all of our adaptation has happened, we need predictability and consistency and control over our environment to know that we're going to be safe and that we will survive the next period.
It's interesting. I'm actually going to combat and challenge that.
Okay.
That's fully within your remit to say, but I don't know if that predictability and routine and that, sure, it's lovely to him.
Yeah.
But for me, and I know because I was speaking to Felix about this as well back in Dublin, about how possibly even change or the unknown can actually bring on this sense of spontaneity or this sense of happiness or fulfillment as well, from not knowing where you'll be next year, or not knowing. I think it was Oscar Wilde said something. Oh, what was it? He had a quote in one of his books about, I'm not going to try and quote him directly, but it was something along the lines of how beautiful it is to not have a set career path or to not know exactly where you'll be in life. It allows you to go down so many more different paths, something along those lines. And maybe I'm speaking a little bit too far in the future here, but I think that for me at least, something really beautiful and something that I actually find a lot of excitement in, with maybe not having this sense of predictability for the next 5, 6, 7 years. So that when a transition comes along, even if it's involuntary, I can almost spin on its head and be like, this is scary and terrifying, but in the moment, it's still quite exciting because there's this change happening, and that change could bring on this new thing.
But there we go. You've added cognition to that, and you've added a step of, I can spin it on its head and think that this is exciting, because yes, it is, and that's where we get to, and finding the joy in these things. But from the innate perspective, you said even though it's stressful and scary, because that's where I'm starting from, is okay, where do we start from internally, and then later on, how do we overcome that, right?
You've caught me with my pants around my ankles.
No, but I completely
You've caught
agree.
me cheeks down, squatting in the bushes there. You've absolutely caught me there.
Primal. Well, this is what we're talking about.
Primal, baby.
But also, there's different levels of predictability, right? And I guess what I'm speaking to in that moment when I'm talking about, an evolutionary perspective, is a lot more of the fundamental sort of
Behavioral.
the fundamental things. No, I don't like the word things, but facets that we need as human beings
Yeah.
for safety and well-being. For example,
Community,
your house, your
routine.
community.
Yeah.
Those are things that, if you're asking Maslow, the humanist
Maslow.
psychologist,
Classic. His whole hierarchy.
yeah,
of needs,
his
isn't
hierarchy of needs, which we need for self-actualization as human beings. Stable living conditions is like a fundamental that we all
baseline,
need.
isn't it?
So yeah, it's literally there as one of the bases.
I think I can speak to that as of recently. Actually, because I've been moving around the place. I've been in 3 different places now, 3 different flats in the past 2 months. Even though I've had this change and this excitement of being everywhere, going everywhere, doing whatever it is, like traveling to these different places, the underlying feeling of when I, go to bed or go to sleep and I see in all my stuff's in bin bags is very, like, even though that excitement of
100%.
change is there, it's very stressful. And there's this underlying feeling of angst there because you're like, oh, you don't even know, like, my entire life's in a bin bag next to my bed. What is happening right now? And I think from that, even for myself, when I unpack my room and just have a bit more of a layout, the level of contentment or just calm that brings with it, I think speaks a lot to that exactly.
Yeah. And that's a really good segue as well, because another thing that transitions bring on in our brains is a higher cognitive load, and it's cognitively taxing. Because again, in line with the predictability.
Bigger brain power.
Well, yeah, big brains.
Layman's terms. I'm not on the same level.
Sorry.
Big brain.
Yes, cognitive load is just our brains working harder to in any given like environment, basically, or to any given stimulus. So in this context, we've got the change, but our brains in a status quo or a baseline, they're used to that and they know that. So there's less sort of brain power working away there. Whereas when we have a transition, a big part of why that also feels tiring is because we're constantly having to adapt to new stimulus, new stimuli, and new environments. And as a result of the transition, these new things that are coming our way, whether that's new people, new location, new routine, new commute, whatever it is, our brain is actively having to process that new information. And therefore it is cognitively taxing, and that's why it feels tiring. So then when you're taxed in that way, all of those other things like your emotional resilience and whatever also suffer. So there is that reasoning as why, as well, even if it's a positive transition, you do feel tired, and our brains are constantly trying to recalibrate to this change and to what's going on.
How much do you think
that is the process that's happening
when someone's going into something new or wants to try something completely different? So for instance, they want to move to Sri Lanka for 3 months and do like a cool trip, whatever it is. How much do you think they're actually seeking that feeling of a slightly higher stress and they're looking to escape that routine or that normalcy? How much do you reckon people actually are searching for what you're saying is the case of new stimuli when they're looking to go to these new places or try something completely different from what they've done for so long?
Do you mind reposing the question?
So, for instance, let's take an example.
Yeah.
You've got Jerry, who's living his life,
John Deere
in London. You've got John B. Pork living in London, and he's finding it boring. He's in finance, whatever it is, and he wants to jet off and go to Sydney. He wants to do something different, and he's looking for that new stimuli. He's looking for the break in routine. He wants to try something completely new. Now, obviously, you're saying there's that feeling of more stress, everything that goes hand in hand with the new stimuli in the new environment. How much do you think Jerry's actually looking for that sort of higher stress or whatever those things are, that innate,
I'd say so,
external factor or that external stress which is happening to him from the drop of routine? How much do you think Jerry's actually looking for that in that switch as compared to just a new place?
I would say for sure that's what's being sort of yearned for, is a break in the status quo, a change, a new excitement. Because again, we're talking about this as if it's, well, we're not, but like just to remind, like say that these aren't all negative things, and our brain having to adapt and go through that recalibration can be very exciting and like emotively exciting, but also like arousing and all of those things. So yeah, of course, I'd say if you're in a Jerry's in a status quo and is feeling really lost, bored, whatever, going and chasing that is 100% maybe a product of trying to recalibrate or shock that sort of baseline into something new, and therefore what's the word, bring on, for lack of a better word, I can't think of the term, but like bring on for himself a state of change and a state of transition, which is then comes with all of these things, right? Whether it's stressful or not. So yeah, I can see that's for sure definitely something that he'd be
Just wishing the best of luck.
Yeah, best of luck going to Sri Lanka, did we say, or Australia?
I think I said both.
Best of luck on your travels, honestly.
Jerry, good luck.
You'll have the best time. Yeah. I think also something else that I find fascinating is, and I don't know enough about it, but I do still like it, is the endowment effect. And this is something that I'm huge on. Yeah. So the endowment effect basically is the theory, and it's also in economics and other areas and other disciplines, but in psychology as well, is that we as human beings, because again, stability, what we know, predictability, safety, we have more of an emotional, financial, physical investment into things that we already have. So in the context of a transition, right, we're thinking the transition itself is a process of moving from one state to the next state, and the transition is that process, right? So in this context, in the endowment effect context, we have more investment in state one, the first state that we're already in. Emotionally, physically, we don't want to move. I don't want to move house. I already know this house. It's safe. It's comfortable. I like it. I don't want to think about something over here. And we would always choose, because of that investment and emotional, all of those investments, we choose that, even though potentially state two or the next option might objectively be far superior. But because we already know this, we have so much investment in it, and we also sort of avoid that loss of this state. So again, it's kind of a cognitive bias that we have that actually might impede us from growth and development, because again, that transition into state two might objectively be something that's full of so much growth, and this second state might be so much more prosperous. But again, from this bias that we have and this hold up, we know this situation, so we know that it's safe, and even though it might be really bad, I know it, so let's just stick with the safety and the routine of what we know. And it's all of those things that sort of might make us lead or see a transition to be maybe an adversarial experience or something that's difficult, because we don't want to leave the safety. And again, coming back to cognitive load, we don't want to have to go through the adaptation. We don't want to leave what we know. We don't want to feel out of control and all of those things. So let's just stick with what we have. But actually, so
the actual effect itself is choosing to stick with what you know and have, because it's the safety of it as compared to going for the new.
Yeah, which again, why then, if you have an involuntary transition, like being served an eviction notice, adds to that. Well, I love this house, I know this house, and even though objectively a new house might be amazing, I don't know it, and I know this, therefore this is safe.
I think that goes hand in hand with so much, like relationships as well.
Exactly.
It's so much. People stick to what they know and it's comfortable because they, it might be out of fear of what's new, but it's so comfortable and so safe with what they have. They're ignoring a huge part of what is wrong. Would that be considered the endowment effect?
100%.
Wow.
100%. And it, like I say, it lends itself to economics, like your investment in property, like whatever it is. And it's a huge phenomenon that is sort of looked into.
What you know because it's safe.
I don't know enough about it, but I do find it fascinating, and I know that it's very valid as a theory, as a sort of a model for human behaviour. So there's all these things, but I think at the crux of it, for me, and I think you agree, is our feelings of control.
I think, just quickly speaking on the endowment effect, because it's really interesting, what would be the thing which takes, let's say Jerry, for instance, he knows what's safe, he doesn't want to look to what could be better because he is happy with where he is. Let's just say that's the instant. What is the thing that would trigger him to finally switch, to be like, I'm going to voluntarily transition? Is it the fact that the state he's currently in is no longer bearable? Because I know something I've found in sales is that only when someone's willing to switch is when it becomes too uncomfortable to stay where they are presently. Yeah. I mean, that's the main factor.
There could be anything. And like I said, I don't know enough about it, but there could be anything that's allowing, because this is a bias that's sort of a subconscious process that our brains go through. And we might not even realize that we're doing it, right? That we're putting all of this investment into this safety as opposed to this new thing. Yeah. So it could be anything that's triggering that active thinking and processing and introspection, to be like, okay, well, I'm really not happy here, what's going on? For then Jerry to be like, oh, okay, well, potentially I just don't like the safety and the routine, and I need to challenge that, and I need to do something to change that. And that could be because it's just got to a stage where it's so unenjoyable or causing so much anguish that he's having to think about why and how and what he can do to change it, and therefore make that transition. But I mean, there could be, there's several different reasons why someone would challenge that. You know, in a relationship, it could be, you know, this is definitely not what we're talking about today, but, you know, if we're thinking about potentially, you know, abusive relationships and a reason why victims might stay in an abusive relationship, one of many reasons is I know this, right? And even though it's not
still
good,
feels
I know
safe.
it. To what point do you stay in that? There's going to be a tipping point at some stage for people that do break out of those, and that's different for every person.
Of course.
But there is that reasoning there as to one of many reasons why someone might stay in there. And I think, like, I guess what I'm trying to say is that the tipping point, or that the catalyst for change, or the catalyst for the transition, would be different for each person.
I think with age, it also comes into it as well.
Okay.
I think it's quite a good point to, even as we're saying with change, it can be different for everyone. There was a study that I found online. It's quite interesting. Thank you very much.
I love a segue.
Oh, I'm great.
Please,
segue.
I want to hear about it.
So a 2016 study zeroed in on a specific brain circuit that helps mammals adapt to change, and found that this circuit became less active with age. Therefore, the researchers concluded younger people find it easier to cope with change by finding new behaviours to help them with achieving their goals.
Makes sense.
So what does that say?
Do we know what that circuit was?
The brain circuit?
Yeah.
XYZ60.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a specific... Or the actual name, do you mean? Or?
Yeah, no, I'm just interested. I would
A
like
lot of Scoobies, mate.
Yeah. No,
we can put the study in the bio.
Okay, thank you. No, it makes sense to me. I mean, I teach in forensic psychology, for example, and I do a lot on sort of the process of memory and things. And there's just evidence in lots of different areas to say that, you know, with age, different cognitive processes sort of do decline. So it would make sense that potentially your adaptation, if we're coming back to your cognitive ability to adapt to situations, would maybe also be optimized at a, you know, early 20s or whatever, in line with, you know, brain functioning. But I don't know that study.
Could
but
be
it
cause
does make
versus
sense.
correlation, maybe. It's the same thing with why younger people are always like need to be on the move or go and test out everything, because they have a high workload with being able to...
Very valid.
Thank you very much. God, I'm good. To be able to handle all this change and the, you know, different stimuli, the different experiences, different people, whereas as you get older, you're much settled with the community who you like and you found. And whether that's, you know, cause or correlation of you find this place which you end up liking, or find this community, or find this place within yourself where you're happy to not change, versus your cognitive load with not being as high, to be able to handle the change. It's an interesting one to think about.
Yeah, definitely.
Just because you're older does not mean...
I definitely don't want to sit here and say that, especially on a study that was conducted on animals, but
on mammals, on whales.
Because it could be very much the strength in just knowing for older people what they want, and not having to transition and go through all of these constant transient states of change.
Look at yourself. You're quite a bit older, aren't you? How old are you now? God,
geriatric.
Jesus, absolute geriatric. I mean, being a
young cortex has
being a young buck here,
yeah.
you know, being an absolute young buck who's taking the world by storm, versus someone in your old age.
Yeah.
We're both changing still,
and that's
we're
a
transitioning.
Brilliant way to segue again that I am not good with change, and you are good with change.
Old man, the future is now.
But I do. I think a lot of it stems around the control, right? And
I think so.
Our feelings of control. We want to be able to control a situation, and even again, if we've elected to make a transition for us in this situation, moving to working all of the hours outside of our full-time jobs to make this podcast, but also like transitioning to somewhat of a new identity, you know, online, all those sorts of things. We can't predict every single outcome of that and how it's going to go, so we don't have full control over over our baseline if we just stayed in the status quo. We then most certainly don't have control if we're served an eviction notice to move house. So at the crux of it, I think, is somewhat of that lack of control, and how we feel about that, and how we feel about that then changes, like you say, what your first initial question was, how we deal with it, and how we approach that control or lack thereof. And I think that's what we want to talk to, right? How we ourselves speak to that and deal with that.
King of transitions.
I know.
Speaking on me, this is now you.
I'm
Here
learning
we go.
I'm learning from you.
that was very impressive. I think what illiterate friend over here, Marcus, is trying to say is how do we handle transitions?
Yeah, for sure. But it's true.
That was very well segued. I was just absolutely riffing into you there.
Thank you very much.
No
I
worries.
appreciate that. I've learned from the best on my little zipping around on my Segway.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
You gotta get segues.
Basically, in the mock episode, I'm desperate for everyone to know, but in a mock episode that we've done and will release in years to come, I'm sure, you told a story about you zipping around on a Segway in Spain.
Oh,
And every time
God.
we say the word Segway, which seems to be about every fifth word at the moment,
It's nuts, yeah.
I just imagine
But
you.
hopefully we do release that. We should definitely release that.
We will.
The little story, I'll just give you some quick context before we go into how to handle transitions.
How we do, yeah.
I think me and my two brothers were in Spain, and we were younger, all very punchable kids, and we basically were all very punchable kids, and we were all on these segways just jetting around the streets of Marbella. That sentence in itself I hate, but I've said it. So we were doing that, and I think I said to you, if I could go back in time, me right now, and look at myself as a kid, this little scrawny dweeb on a Segway.
Excuse you.
No, I'm going to say this because I object. This is myself. This is not negative self-talk.
It is.
No, because I love myself now, and that's fine.
Oh, say that louder for the people in the back, please.
Everyone knows it. It's
Say
fine.
it. Go on.
No.
One more time.
What that? I was a little dweeb back in
the
high school.
last sentence you just said.
I love myself.
Oh,
there
thanks
we
so
go. You
much.
have to be yourself.
You've
now.
got a lot of love in the park.
Regardless, a lot of love around the park. Basically, there's just an image in my head of me on the Segway with this little helmet just jetting around these tourists in Marbella. And the mental image of it just gives me goosebumps in the worst way possible. Beep, beep, I'm coming through, and just, oh, man.
I mean,
I don't judge myself, but for that
there's
moment,
many
I
things
do.
I did as a. Well, what were you, like 21 then, or what?
Yeah, this was when I was 23, so
Okay,
this was about 6
last
months
year.
ago. Yeah,
Okay.
this was last year.
There's many things I did when I was 23, all those years ago, that make me feel
Can you
uncomfortable.
remember that?
Nope.
Nope.
All gone.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Dust.
Dust in the abyss.
Hmm.
Yeah, no, we love our past selves, even every version of them, even though they're little rats sometimes.
Sure thing.
Or not, who knows?
Or
Because
not.
when I then said about my story about Healying around Spain on probably the same weeks of the same
Heelys are
summer.
cool. I would get Heelys now.
Oh my god, Heelys! Bring. I think they
My
are coming
birthday
back.
is soon, Marcus. I want to make that aware.
Don't say that because you know I will.
I will properly. That commute, I will be healing to work. You will see
Eyebrows.
me just. That's quite a far Healy.
You've said it now.
That's quite a far
You
Healy.
Healying through Holland Park.
Me healing on my way to say to these people how we handle transitions.
Yes,
That was a weak one.
Yeah, I got what you were
God,
trying to do, but
sorry there.
he was trying to transition and segue into
That was how we
yeah,
handle a transition.
yeah.
Well,
Well,
with a transition like this house move,
well.
what are some tangible steps that you find yourself taking, whether it's in order or not, to approach the transition, whether it's voluntary, involuntary?
I'll go. I guess from you're asking what my first step is. I guess I don't know that I have like steps. I think these are all sort of. I imagine these to be sort of like a Gantt chart for anyone that knows their charts, where you're kind of working through all of these in
Yeah.
unison. So it's not like a chronological order of okay, do this then this, or for me anyway. But for me, I think in the immediate, and it comes back to sort of like a bit of a crisis plan or whatever, because when you're served an eviction notice, that is something that is a stressor and can be acutely stressful in that moment. So I think in the immediate, and I'm saying I think like I've literally just been through this in the last month, what I immediately did when I got that eviction notice was I just thought, okay, well, this is the reality.
Yeah.
I'm not going to negate my feelings, and I will work through those feelings. But in this moment, I literally can't do anything about it. The full control has been taken away from me in this moment. So let me work on what I can control.
It's quite a stoic mindset, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's very much what can you control?
Yeah.
You can only control your reactions. It's quite a steadfast
Well,
way of approaching something, I think.
I think for me, another thing which I wanted to speak about more, and I definitely want to unpack these individually, is like the perspective of it as well. And I firstly want to just preface this with, I fully understand a lot of transitions aren't this way, and I don't want to sound really privileged or like tone deaf when I say this, and I'm just immediately am saying that. But speaking for me in this moment, one thing I always look to, and I learnt from one of my older brothers, George, when I was a lot younger, when we were just going through different things in life. He would always say to me, whether it was a friendship thing or, moving house when we were younger or whatever it was, he would always say, and I believe in many ways he still lives by this, is imagine yourself in 2 years. Will this issue with your friend or whatever it is, firstly, will you even remember it?
Yeah.
Secondly, will you still feel upset about it? And will you, care, be, anxious, all of those things? If so, just think about like how much weight you want to give it. And I'm not saying that to say like don't allow yourself to feel things, but also I guess finding a balance there with perspective.
It's a lovely tool to use, isn't it?
It is.
A lovely tool.
And again, I just want to say there are things that you go through in life and transitions you go through in life where that doesn't work because they are so seriously, adverse, grief, bereavement, whatever it is, a severe trauma.
Loss of any sort of type.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whereas this, it was something where I could be like, okay, yes, I don't want to move, and yes, this isn't fun, but in 2 years, obviously I'll remember it because I'll remember moving house, but on the next stage, I won't still be feeling anxious, hopefully, by then in 2 years. I won't still be like nervous about moving. So like, I guess it's how useful is that in that moment? And also in the grand scheme of life and where my trajectory is and where I'm going to be in 2, 5, 10 years time, I could allow myself to panic and fly off the wall about this. But actually, I don't know that in placing that in that moment, in the wider scheme, how relevant that is for me to do.
Yeah.
And yes, all of this to say that it is a stressful thing and I will come to that. But in that moment, I don't need to fully in this moment fly off the wall and get really upset about it. What I can do and what I need to do is focus on the steps that I need to take to make this as comfortable and as best as possible, right? So for me, I guess it's, again, that regaining of control. I can't control this eviction notice, so what can I control? I need to book in some viewings, I need to have a conversation with my housemates, make sure we're all on the same page, give ourselves time, give myself time to think and reflect and do all those things. Those are all steps that I'm then actively taking. I wonder what your immediate thought would be.
To that?
I guess...
I think I think that is, I mean, I know I do that a lot, but for me it's almost a bit later on if there was to be a linear progression of transitions. I think it's very useful for times of stress, for instance, or worry, for you to pull on those tools that you've just mentioned there. What can I control? This will all be over soon. I'll look back on this and laugh. All these things, they're great tools to have in your toolbox for when you're going through these times of worry or stress. For me, the first thing with any transition is to embrace the actual change itself and not resist it, is to actually come to terms with it. Before I take actionable steps, before I take anything, it's just embrace that change is happening. I think resisting it first off will cause you a lot more discomfort. Change is, I think, the only constant in life, if I can say that. We're just smirking. What's up?
No, it's just pulls back a conversation we had. But yeah, sorry, to carry on, it just reminded me, nostalgic. It was a nice conversation we had once about when we were walking the streets of Rome about this exact thing.
Oh my god, I remember that.
But the listeners don't know about that, so let's carry
that was
on.
That was an off-camera chat. That was lovely. Yeah, for me, change is the only for everyone. Change is the only constant in life. So embracing it first off, and not resisting the change, not resisting this transition that it's meant for you because it's happening, is very important, and that goes very much hand in hand with, first off, allowing yourself to grieve whatever sort of thing that you're leaving behind. Whether it's even for me, leaving East, first things first, coming to terms with, so for instance, when I knew that my eviction notice was coming up to an end, it wasn't an eviction notice, it was just my tenancy was coming up to an end. The first thing wasn't, okay, where should I look? It was, okay, this is happening. How do I feel about that? I'm going to be leaving East soon. Let me agree with that. And that's more of a constant throughout this whole process.
Yeah.
What's up?
No, I'm obviously actively listening and thinking about like how I would be like that, but I want you to carry on.
So for me, allowing myself to grieve in whatever sort of way that looks like through this process, and this would probably be a lasting thing throughout the whole thing, or throughout the whole transition itself, allow myself to come to terms with the fact that it's ending. Maybe I can reflect on some nice points which has happened, whilst also then taking actionable steps. For me, that grieving means that when I come to this new place, or I've moving through the transition, I'm not looking back with regret or despair or, looking back of what could have been, because I've allowed myself to close off that chapter and look to something new, allow myself to properly sit with the fact that it's changing and that it's ending, but be happy and grieve whatever was, allows me to go into this new chapter or this new transition looking forwards instead of looking backwards.
Yeah. I don't know if I'm looking at it too sort of literally, but when you're saying that, I was imagining like literally the situation, and for me, in my mind, it's like, how can I'm like, I can't, I need to do all those things, of course, and that is valid, but like, I fundamentally need to like grasp what I can of this situation.
This
So
isn't me
first, let
spending
me.
months, by the way, sitting
No,
down
but
being like,
still,
oh, that was not like, if I've been served like this is where my brain goes instantly, and then within like, it could even be like an hour, I'm like, okay, what steps could I actively take right now? So it's very much a quick thing as well.
I think it's funny though, the difference there, because
Yeah,
I see there to be a difference there.
I think
My
so.
innate like knee jerk is to then
Mm,
be active and be sort of like proactive and be like, what can I do?
yeah.
Yours is to let me just reflect for a minute and then work. And I think maybe there could be many reasons, but part of that is I'm not good with change, and I'm not good with the lack of control. Whereas it's something that you often embrace more so, and maybe there in itself is like, okay, well, if someone's not good with change, they immediately need to like grasp control over that situation,
Yeah.
and that's what I'm obviously trying to do in my step. Whereas you're kind of like, I know this change that comes with its adversities, but also let's embrace it.
It goes back to what we were saying, I think, in the first episode with the grasp one has on life, or the grasp for me having on life, is feeling like I need to bend life or bend life to my will, saying this needs to happen this way or I need to happen this way. For me, when I've let go of that grasp of life, being like, whatever happens, it'll be the best thing to me because that's the only thing that can happen to me. It allows me to almost, if I'm trying to put it into like a visual thing, I'm just basically jumping out of a plane backwards with no parachute, but like falling and be like, this is all happening. This is, just relaxing. Maybe not out of a plane, maybe just like landing on a pillow instead. Maybe that could be much more of a more accurate visual representation. But for me, it's just trusting that whatever happens is best.
Yeah.
Allow myself to reflect and, enjoy what's happened.
Yeah.
Sure, there are definitely actionable steps that I can take. Okay, how can I control this? I can't control what's happened to me. I can only control how I react. But first, let me grieve or reflect on whatever I'm leaving behind, because it's something that's lovely and it's something that's happened to me and it's building my character.
Yeah.
It could be very short, that sort of time there, but allows me to go into this new transition, a new change with a lot more of a clear head.
Yeah. It's fascinating. I do find it really interesting because for me, like,
where do you think your fear of change comes from?
God, big question. I'm I don't, the way my brain's wired, and I'm not getting into conversations about specific things, but the way my brain's wired is I just like I'm not very agile to those things, and actually more so when it's sort of a short-term change or like a really non-significant change, like a last-minute change of plan, or if someone's like late or whatever, or I'm late, those small changes really get to me and wind me up, and I can't. I just
Really?
I
When I was late yesterday.
yeah. So side eye. When I just don't like it, and I also just there's lots that I'm not agile to quick changes like that. Or if someone tries to put in a last minute meeting, I'm like, I know that I can do that, but in my mind I'm like, you can't do that because you've already got a plan for whatever.
My old housemate Will's the same. If anything changed for the whole day, he'd just freak him out.
Yeah.
Like, no, that was not on the agenda, and whatever it was, and sounds quite similar.
Yeah. And I think that does translate to then bigger transitions and like transitions in life, but to a much smaller extent.
Yeah.
I'm a lot more adaptable and agile to bigger transitions, and I'm glad that is the case, and I feel like actually I adopt a very different mindset to these bigger transitions, and probably part of me where these smaller ones are non-significant and more fleeting, I probably allow myself a bit more of a space to be have a tantrum, not an actual tantrum, but for lack of a better word, to be a bit more emotive, or to endorse those feelings of resistance. Whereas when it's
What's
like
different with just, apart from the size of the transition?
Well, I think in that moment I can allow myself to be a bit sort of frustrated or rigid, because the consequences aren't really either way too severe of let's just add a meeting that wasn't planned or whatever, or let's just be late. Like, yes, it's annoying. So but I think when it comes to like a big transition in life,
that feels more pointless.
Well, it's kind of, I guess I need to switch on and I see myself, I'm trying to articulate it. I see myself to sort of be taking on, okay, let's put on the serious head now, because this is important and this is like important life. Let's not be, I'm not saying this to negate my other feelings, but let's not be childish. Let's not like sulk, because there's space for that, and I'll come to that, and I will allow myself to feel those feelings. But right now, you've got to be responsible, and you have to think properly and sensibly and rationally, and not sort of have a tantrum, or for lack of a better word, go into those things. So I am just versed in being adaptable to bigger changes. I also think in my childhood, like I moved around a couple times, those sorts of things, and it's something that like I say, without sounding flippant or negating the feelings, it's going to happen. So put your, I guess, brave face on and control what you can control, and then emote over it afterwards. But in that small moment, when it's a small thing like a meeting being added, what can I like? It's just a meeting being added, like. I don't know. I just get frustrated about it.
So this is a Wendy's.
Respectfully. Yeah. So I'm not sure, but I don't know if that it made sense at all.
It does completely. Yeah.
But I think when it's a serious thing, what I guess I'm trying to say is that I need to be serious, and I need to switch on, and I need to take responsibility and accountability here. So yes, my first step is to take control, but then, like you say, I do allow space, and I'm someone that very much makes the best of these bigger situations when they change and when they come. Well, that's the thing. And also, it's why for me, and it's very valid if that's something you need to do, but why for me in this situation of transition, I'm grieving and losing something, and I very much am someone with the endowment effect that I endorse what I already have and don't want to move to something that I don't know. But if I have to, and I'm doing that, I immediately, again, I have a positive attribution bias in that sense, that I'm like, okay, well, this is happening, so let's make it exciting and let's make a good thing about it. And I don't think I actively think those words, but my mind, as an adaptive sort of function, is like, oh, it's really cool, you get a much bigger house and you don't have to deal with what the problems are in this house, and even small things like, God, I'm not going to miss this kitchen door that doesn't close properly, and all those things. You just start to already like emotionally shift over to this thing, and that's for me like finding the joy in that new state 2, because we're going there. There's no discussion there. I think that's something that we speak on
one of the fifth or one of the final parts of how to handle a transition, is finding the light in the next steps. Is what can you look forward to in this next transition, and focusing on that allows you to emotionally shift into what's coming and what's new.
Because something that you do very well to sort of emulate is the fact that every state of life is there's joy in, and change is good in all ways, and it should be embraced. So why is this any different? Let's embrace the change of the move. Let's embrace the change of sleepless nights, making a podcast, because all of those states, there's beauty in all of them. And yes, that's not saying that the process of getting to that state is going to be a bit, difficult, tiring, all of those things. But there's things to look forward to, and there's always things to be excited about in this context of moving house and starting a podcast or whatever.
It can be anything. That's exactly it. It's for me when I was thinking, moving west, I don't really want to move west. Like, it's not an area I've ever particularly thought of. But if I've gone through, I've processed how I'm feeling, start to grieve east, what can I control? What sort of room can I look forward to? What can I do to make this more tangible? And finally, I can be like, well, what am I looking forward to? What are the good things which can come out of this? Is there a cool gym nearby where I'm living which I can go to? What are the green spaces nearby? I'm near Hyde Park and Regent's Park. Cool. These are all amazing areas. Or I'm living with amazing people. Or I can lean into this podcast more. Focusing my direction, or telling my mind so being very intentional with where I am thinking or where I'm feeling. Being like, oh, you have all these things. I'm setting my thoughts or my sights, on these good things objectively. Allows me to shift my own perspective from this doom and gloom, I have to change, I'm going to miss all these things, into much more of a, what am I looking forward to? What is the light in this challenge? And that, I think, is difficult for like anything, and that's not me preaching, but if one or if myself can get better at doing that in any sort of transition, even in transitions which are inherently probably quite negative, that'll allow for a lot more of a light, because it's your perspective is obviously your reality. So how you see it is what's going to create that positivity.
And that's all you can do, right?
Exactly.
And I say I'm bad at transitions, but when you're saying all those things, I like yourself, I do feel like I'm good at that side of it, and making the positive of it, and seeing, I'm nothing, and I'm in agreement with yourself and the other housemates. Like, we're just really excited to move now and just want to do it,
exactly.
because we've kind of been through that process of being like, this is going to be sad, this changed, all of these things. So yeah, just really excited for it and finding all those positives in it. I do think also, before we sort of wrap up, there's some importance in talking about positive transitions and actually the opposite impact, which we've both spoken about at the beginning of both episode 2 and 3, of actually, because it's a positive transition, it's something you've elected to do, and it's like, oh, this is amazing, whether that's, you know, starting a podcast or getting a promotion at work or getting a new relationship or a new friendship or whatever. You're like, oh, this should all be great, because it's all amazing, and is only bringing prosperity to my life. So then when you feel tired, fatigued, flat, and all of those things that come from the increased cognitive load and, you know, letting go of other things, you know, even if it's a positive thing, you're still letting go of state one, you know, having less responsibility at work because you didn't have that promotion, for example. There's benefits to that, right? Not having that friendship, you have more time, whatever it is. Not being in that relationship, you have more autonomy, or not having a podcast to make, you have a lot more time, right? So there's always things you're letting go of. So that is in itself, even though objectively you're like, this is an amazing thing, it's also okay for that not to feel amazing all the time. And for you to feel tired, and for you to feel taxed, and for your brain to be constantly recalibrating and doing all those things and letting go of something that you're objectively, you're like, that isn't as good as this state 2, but you're still letting go of something, right?
I feel like because it's almost more voluntary though, and you're actively, willingly pursuing this change and this transition, it's a lot easier to let go of those things, because you're like, I've made this change. I have made the elective choice to say, I am going to start a podcast, for instance. So I am absolutely fine with my time being poured into this because I've chosen to do this, for instance. So for me, for instance, when my evenings were more free to sit down, play guitar, whatever it was, that's not happening anymore. But I don't look back, or I don't have these feelings of, oh, I'm frustrated with that. And there's no, whilst it would be nice, I've actively pursued and I'm changing towards something that I want to do. And that's been a transition in itself. And sure, there are things I've let go of, but I'm a lot more okay with that from the get-go, because that was a choice I willingly and voluntarily made.
And that comes back to the control, right?
Exactly.
And you're feeling like you've made that change yourself and you've chosen to do that. But in saying that, which we both have come to terms with in our conversations, maybe without even putting words to, because even though I'm controlling it and I'm choosing this, it is okay that it's not always okay. And I shouldn't, speaking about myself, catastrophize that it doesn't feel okay and it's not always joyful, because yes, on the whole, I want to find the joy in this, but at the same time, this is an amazing thing that I wouldn't change, and I'll do it forever, and, you know, all of those things, it's bringing me passion and joy. And again, state 2 is far superior in my mind objectively to state 1 in this context, and I've chosen that. But at the same time, it's still allowed to be difficult and hard and tiring and taxing, which we both have found. And in saying that, it's allowing ourselves the space to sit with those adverse feelings and not catastrophize and be like, this is supposed to be an amazing transition. This is all supposed to be really good.
Completely.
Because I've chosen this, and because it's something that is better than state 1. Why, you know, I'm feeling really bad now. Like literally me yesterday. And it's allowing ourselves to know that it's so tiring, flipping tiring, and flipping stressful.
Let go of the expectations of what one should think you should feel.
Just because you've chosen it and you're doing it and it is better, it doesn't mean that it's that there's also not going to be negatives to that you've experienced.
I think a lot of it always goes back to the central sort of core theme. I say this to you a lot, but is how to stay present, or staying present allows you to be very much in your own space right now. Your expectations for your future self or your past self are all your own constructs. And the more I find I can stay present in any sort of given moment, means sure I can enjoy that moment more, but it means I let go of these expectations of how I felt I should feel. Or for instance, if I'm, you know, going to something new and I think, oh, I thought it would be better, which is completely normal to have expectations. The more I can let go of what I thought it should be and just, I'm here now. How am I feeling as of right now? Brings you back to a more centered point, a grander point. It's quite a nice world 360. That was very, very enjoyable.
It was. So,
thank you very much.
What are our summaries? I think.
Whoa. Summaries, don't segue again.
Yeah.
For me, that's my main takeaway. I'm never stepping on a segue again.
Favorite takeaway?
Peruvian.
Nice.
Never had Peruvian takeaway, but I imagine it'd be quite good.
Right. Okay.
What about you?
I just love a good bog
Chinese.
standard curry.
Oh, curry.
Yeah. It's my favorite. Anyway, so I think we're talking about like a lot of it comes from control.
I think
and
it does.
leaning into the lack of control, like you say, finding joy in things that you can't control, but also in that moment for me is also controlling what I can control in the context of a house.
Yeah.
Booking viewings, establishing where I want to go, what I want, like making those tangible steps to manage what's going on, and
But allowing yourself to feel those things as well.
Of course.
And that's obviously different sizes come from it, but allow yourself to sit with the
Throughout.
change, be happy with it throughout, and grieve what has been in any sort of form, no matter how small.
And you're allowed to grieve, like we say, even if it's a positive transition.
Exactly. You're allowed to be like, oh, that was lovely, wasn't it? And even reflecting positively on something as you grieving it. So that's something to, think on. And then finally, look for the positives in it, in the change.
I also think the perspective, right, for me
Perspective's
anyway.
huge. Yeah. In 2, 3, 5, 10 years, when you're old and sat around a fire with whoever, thinking about life, you'll look back on whatever moment you're in now, hopefully, and laugh.
Grateful that you'd made the most of it.
Because it is, everything we go through is making us into the people we are meant to be. I think if you can try and hold that in the moment, which is tough, that's a lovely thing to do.
It is. Again, that perspective comes with a caveat.
It does.
It's not always possible.
Of course.
But yeah, I think...
Give yourself grace and kindness.
Yeah.
Is one of the
As
things.
always, grace and kindness. We love grace. We love kindness.
It's grace.
Thank you very much. Grace? You don't know Grace?
Don't know
You
Grace.
Get to know Grace.
Yikes.
Yeah.
Hi, Grace.
Hi, Grace.
Grace
Anyway,
watching.
I think that was lovely, and I
That was
really
lovely.
enjoyed that conversation.
Thank you very much for that.
Um,
Should we go on to our weekly mood boost? Something that
weekly mood
I know we were saying
boost.
earlier our weeks have been a bit more flat than usual, but I think,
Yes.
as we've always said, something that picks us up in the little moments, something that really brightens our day. For you, what has been your weekly mood boost?
Well, for me, I haven't thought about myself because I was going to mention 2 of our listeners' mood boosts.
We'll go for that instead then.
And then maybe I'll think about myself as well. But 2 of our listeners had the exact same mood boost.
Nuts.
And it was really funny. So I just want to mention both Elle and Rebecca. Both sent in that they did a run for the first time with their partners, their respective partners.
Yeah.
This is completely separate from one another. And they both individually like running, but their partners either hadn't or they don't run together. And both of them, for the first time ever, had run with their partners. And Elle was quite specifically funny, saying, "We managed to run 10K together without a single argument." And I thought that was really cool. So yeah, little mood boost for them, and I'm really glad that they had that, and that was something that they got joy from. So yeah,
Good. Amazing.
You had.
I was going to say something. Well, I had something, but it's actually changed as of last night.
Okay.
I was walking to yours, and Rachel, one of my colleagues, she messaged me in the evening saying that, because obviously we're in sales, she got 2 more closes for the day. So she got 3 closes in the first day of the month.
Nice.
And
Yes, Rachel.
she was like, she was just really, really super happy. And it made me quite proud as well, because I basically, coach her a little bit here and there, seeing the improvements in what she's doing and how she's just, I don't know, brightening up. And sales is quite a tough job. It's very, very fickle sometimes. And, you often don't feel appreciated with where you are. So seeing that, just seeing her attitude and response to that, it isn't the fact that she's, making commission or whatever. It's more just the fact that she's improving and she's happy with it. And thought to message me, I thought was lovely. And that just, like, I was sitting the fact that, she's literally come and messaged me after work. Made me proud and made me really super happy that she thought she could message me like that. So
That's lovely.
Boosted my day.
That's really, really nice.
Yeah, it did.
Nice. I think that's good, right?
Yeah, for me it is.
For our weekly mood boosts.
I think so.
Big up Rachel. Big up Elle. Big up Rebecca.
Well, you guys, well
lovely mood boosts.
Absolutely.
We maintain they don't have to be groundbreaking, life-changing mood boosts.
No.
The loveliest ones can often be whatever the smallest things in your world. For example, the last few days, this is something that might not boost some people's moods, but for me, it's been quite nice. I've just been waking up before my alarm, which I often do anyway, but like specifically, I've been needing to get up earlier, and each time I've been waking up with my alarm and feeling
The clocks have gone
good about
forwards
waking up
or
earlier.
back.
So that's just a small thing that I'm feeling satisfied and I'm grateful that I'm waking up earlier. And
Beautiful.
not feeling like rubbish about it and feeling energized when I wake up, which is really nice. So yeah, that's another example.
Well, let us know your weekly mood boost. It can be anything. Message us, put it in the comments. or just say it aloud, and we'll try and think about it from the universe's
Yeah.
sending us signals. So
We have our Instagram story that goes up every Tuesday asking for your mood boost. So please,
we will pick you.
let us know, which will be tomorrow when you're hearing this, what your mood boost is on Instagram, and we will. I mean, I really love looking through them. Anyway, thank you
I think
so
we're gonna wrap it up.
much.
Thank you very much.
Hug, air hug.
Air hug. There
as
you go.
always.
I want to shake your hand now.
Real pleasure.
Yes.
And
Wonderful episode.
yeah, I really, really, really liked that. And I wasn't sure where we'd get to and what we'd speak about.
Yeah.
But it again
always works
not controlling
out.
it. I'm not. Don't need to control it.
The less you control it, the better
let
it
go
works
of
out.
controlling it.
It's beautiful. All right. Well, I'm gonna
Yes,
pause the
I'll
music
do
and Mark's
some
gonna do some
ASMR
ASMR quickly.
Doing the closing off. Okay, guys. Thank you for listening to
Guys.
episode 3. As we said, this is our last ever episode, so